So we're going to start out here doing another video on some tips and tricks around ways that you can use Copilot to facilitate some administrative work, investigations, and other processes. And we're going to start out with a police standards of conduct rubric, and I'll let Chief explain and talk a little bit about what that would look like. And I'll make this bigger so everybody could see it. What that would look like in the real world, or what kind of a document that this would come from as a starting point.
Sure. So almost any agency will have some sort of ethics policy or the way we treat or standards of conduct, something of that nature. And it's also like a CALIA standard. And so you will have some sort of policy that says this is how we will treat the public, and this is how we define ethics and how we define what we're going to do in our code of conduct. And even states like state of Nebraska has an officer code of conduct that every officer, once they're certified, has to sign and notarize. So it's a very much so, this is how I'm going to behave. But the problem is when we start getting into internal affairs investigations, is trying to put that on a scale, and that's measurable. And again, we get back to that. People feel like the chief is treating one person better than the other. And so to really define what those boundaries look like and where everything falls in, not many agencies have a rubric. So you should already build one. Some unions require it, but it's something that you can build very easily, as you're about to show and talk about. And then you can utilize that to assist in what you're handling with the investigation, which is kind of exciting about how we're going to do this. So you can see what happens on the back end. So go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so this is the output, right? We have a rubric, and then let's go and talk a little bit about how did we get there. So you could certainly utilize Copilot. You could hit the work tab, and you could use a reference to your own policy and ask it to create a rubric. What I did, so as to be more generic and use things that are publicly available information, is I just asked it. I said, create a rubric based on police officer professional standards from open source information to be used for a demo for analysis. And it went out and it grabbed data. And so it didn't just, hallucinate and make this up. It actually references police professional standards in the United States from the Office of Justice Programs. Another one, I think this one is International Association of Chiefs of Police, et cetera. So it went out and basically did research, pulled in professional standards from organizations that are respected and produced this kind of material. And then it compiled this rubric, right? So ethical conduct, communications, decisions, yada, yada, down the side. And then it provide a scale of 1 to 4, with 4 being the best and 1 being the worst, and define kind of what does that mean, developing, proficient, exemplary, needs improvement. And now I copied it and pasted it over into an Excel sheet, so I had it as a separate standalone document that I could use for reference.
And real quick, just to point out, and I know we've talked about this in other videos, but that this is secure. This is in the work environment. So you're in an enterprise agreement. This information's not going out and training LLMs all over the web. It's where you're at within your system. Is that correct? And then yes, you see that with the green or the shield up top that helps you to remember that. So just so you know where you're putting your information and that you're not putting information at risk out on the web, especially if you're, maybe there are certain aspects of this rubric that you really don't want publicly or need to be confidential for one reason or another, or maybe there's an agreement with the union or something. You want to make sure that you keep that safe. So that's what that is.
Yeah, and this is the green box that Chief's referring to, where it tells you this is enterprise data protection applies to the chat. So even the stuff that I'm putting in here and asking questions of the web, my prompts aren't being stored, my data is not being stored, it's not being used to train the model, because this is all within an enterprise paid subscription. Okay, so back to my rubric. So now I have it over in a standalone document, and so that I can reference it and use it, I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to bring up.
We're going to talk a little bit more. I mean, transcripts are everything, and we're going to talk about how you need them for so many different aspects. I have some other videos on just how you get transcripts. There's ways you can do it in Word, and there's ways you can do it third party, but we'll go over that another time. But let's just say you did that, so here's your transcript.
Yep, so transcript coming from a body cam. This is generated, right? I generated this, so it actually has in parentheses kind of the description of what's going on in the video other than just the transcript, so it gives it a little more context. I wanted it to lay it out that way, so when I had it generated, I asked it to generate in that kind of fashion. So, but the bottom line is we have a transcript of an officer that maybe isn't behaving quite like everybody would like their public servants to behave when they're interacting with the public in what shouldn't have been anything other than kind of a routine stop, maybe a little more than routine because the person was speeding and, who knows what was going on and why the officer was kind of upset. But what we're going to do is now take this and ask Copilot to compare one to the other and put out for us a score on anything that was violated and to what degree it met the rubric.
And again, that's the beauty of the rubric, is now we're assigning a score. So we're actually giving some sort of level of tangibility in our documents that are going to say, this is why you fall into this area. And now we can give the why behind, especially with this younger generation that want to know the why behind everything that's happening. We can now provide that because we have a rubric that's going to give us a score to be able to say, this is where things look and the way this should be handled. Jim's or Dave's putting in the prompts. And this could be used again in like multiple settings, but it's easier to just kind of see the example at hand and how it works and what that looks like. But maybe you can go over that prompt, Dave, and help us to see what you're saying.
Yep, I will. So I'm saying, provide me a score based on this transcription of a police officer interaction during a traffic stop based on these standards in this rubric. And now I need to put the documents in to reference what it is I'm talking about. You can do that while you're typing it, but I type pretty poorly, so I figure I'd type first and then worry about adding things in later. So the way to add that is just to hit a / and it starts going to the different places. So it has my traffic stop in there. So now it's added that document in, and then I'm going to say interactions based on this rubric. And so now I want to reference the rubric as well. And if you can't get to them right there, because not everything pops up, only like very recently indexed things that you've interacted with, you can always navigate to it. Or this also supports drag and drop, where you could open up your file explorer and just drag the files in into the prompt. All right, so now I have my prompt in place and away we go.
And just note, you have to have the file closed in order to throw it into these things. So just remember, when you're like, I can't get it to work, close the file, then you throw it in there, then it can analyze it. And you can see it's going to spit out an answer pretty quickly. And this is going to be really valuable insight that I think you're going to see from some of the most minor violations that you might have in a police department. It'll give you guidance on training all the way to something that could be incredibly egregious. But this helps you see everything in between.
Yeah, so it's done, right? And of course, you want to always keep the person in the loop, right? You need to apply your own experience, but this gives you kind of a starting point to where every officer, if you were evaluating them, you would have a standard that you were evaluating against, where the machine was laying it out, and then you can apply your own experience and cognitive abilities, et cetera, to the situation. But I think if we open back up our rubric, take a quick look at this, we had 10. We had 9. So we had 9 areas that were in the rubric, and not all of them applied. So if we go back, only 8 applied. And it says this one's not directly applicable, but problem solving needs improvement, use of force, developing, which is, hires better, lowers worse, professional knowledge, community engagement. I think we could all agree that maybe community engagement needs a little improvement there. Decision making, and it has an explanation, right? Why it did this and why it's scoring it that particular way. And you could go in here and be a little more complex. You hate certain things. You could say this is more important than that. You could also use this same process against one of our earlier videos where we had officer complaints, and you think about taking those officer complaints and running them against something like this in your standards of conduct. So it's cut and dry, right? It's measurable, it's defined. There's key performance indicators that say, here's the scores that you've agreed to, this is what you were trained on doing, and you're not meeting those standards, rather than leaving it to the whims of an opinion or a relationship or individual personalities where not everybody gets along with their boss, kind of process. So Chief, please.
Well, and I also think of a situation where a lot of agencies, some whether it's a state association or like national, like CALIA or whatever, there's typically a lot of agencies will adopt a policy that requires a supervisor to randomly check body cam footage, maybe 1 to 3 videos once a month, once a quarter. There'll be some sort of time sensitive standard with that. And then the next question is, well, what do I do? Well, I watch the video and I go, well, he's not really violating policy, but he could he could tend to be nicer or whatever. This really gives that supervisor or the sergeant that insight that they can go back to that officer and say, I reviewed 5 of your body cam footage. This is what is happening in your body cams on your traffic stops or on your general contacts. And these are the things we love about you. And these are the things that we want to watch you change or improve. And now you have this matrix you could just set in there. Here, this is where you fall on the score. And we would like to see that. And this is, subjective perhaps, as far as, the standards that you have with Copilot. But at the same time, I think it's an incredible starting point. And then you can go from there and you can expound. But talking about most supervisors, it's not their primary task to sit and review their officers' body cam footage. And so this is an extra task. This is extra work, and oftentimes can, become problems of contention. How come your body cam reviews aren't done, or you need to get them done in the next week? They kind of get rushed or whatever. So this is a really great way to turn into that coach for the officer instead of just, I'm your supervisor and I reviewed your body cam. This is what you do. But instead say, hey, listen, the way you approach cars on traffic stops is phenomenal. But you go downhill when you always give them the reasons why they need to be safer. This would be a better way to approach that. That is valuable. That's what helps have an officer's career do better. And that also improves your relationship with the supervisor, because you're actually giving them some really good insight that's valuable to them, and then telling them the why behind it. So this is phenomenal. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for all that. So while Chief was talking, so it's all recorded there kind of in the background. I'll explain to you what I did. So I copied this. I probably could have done it from right here, but there's several ways to do it. I copied it. I dropped it into a Word document. And then based on what was in there, I asked Microsoft Word and Copilot to help me craft this into a disciplinary notice, or I was in the military, so we would have called this a counseling statement, or whatever the appropriate term is, to basically create a notice that says to the officer, this is who you are, this is what you did, and I'm writing this to inform you as a formal notice that, this is a problem, you need to fix it, and then what your plan of action is to fix it. So I quickly went from body cam, transcript, rubric, score, to some sort of activity with documenting a process, so that I can get it to the officer and try to correct the behavior and get ahead of it, and save an officer, get them to be improved, because we know we're short-staffed and we don't need people running out the door, right? So just a way to rapidly go through that kind of a process, assuming that that's the path that you would normally follow as a course within your organization.
And that doesn't even have to be a negative memo, right? This could also be, hey, you're phenomenal. We saw this. We're putting you in for this award. And almost any department, or I shouldn't almost, but many departments have some sort of form, especially if they're accredited. They'll have some sort of form that says, we need you to complete this form in order to nominate somebody for some sort of award that they would receive. And again, those things go unnoticed oftentimes because it's so cumbersome, or it's a heavy lift to get all of that together. But that is everyday work that supervisors need to do. And if they get caught up in paperwork and everything else, all of a sudden that award that they were going to give gets kicked down the road until 3 weeks later. Well, I guess it wasn't that major, and then they just never do it. And I can tell you from hosting multiple award ceremonies, your staff come back to you and they're like, but you didn't do this, and I didn't. And I almost sometimes get frustrated doing an award ceremony, because you leave it going, who's going to be mad at me that they didn't get recognized, thinking they were going to get recognized for something. And so you can also take that body cam, throw it into an award memo, and submit that as well. And again, it just throws everything in there, and something that would be a 30-minute or an hour or a 2-hour process suddenly is a few seconds, and you're able to kick send on an email, and that's taken care of. So again, another great, there's multiple ways this can pivot and be a benefit.
Yep, and I would echo that oftentimes we focus on the negative, because that can make you end up on the front page of the paper or on the nightly news if something's going wrong. But we should be striving to be on the nightly news because things are going well, right? I just took a picture of an officer in my town where I live helping a stranded motorist push their car about 200 meters to get them into a safe place. I'm going to send that down to the chief and just say, hey, saw some of the Fayetteville's finest doing the things that they should do. I think those are great messages, and all of us in the community should be doing that to award and applaud our public safety officers.
Awesome. We hope that you found this valuable.